わかったか。またつくか。よかった。滋賀県と無関係宣言できた。ああ、無関係宣言した。ありがとうございます。なんかテロ帝国って批判されてるんや今。帝国か。だって拉致のほっとけ。どういうわけだ。選挙ボイコットせえ。ボイコット。本当にボイコットせえ。ボイコットで。本当にボイコットせえって。削除しちまったか。いいわ、国賠訴訟するわ。裁判だぜ。抜きだよ。これで28兆円手に入るわ。賠償金払い。賠償金払い。また削除しまったか。さて、長増し相手に損害賠償請求書。黒田さん雇うまたは。 国賠訴訟しようか。サイバーテロやったから。国賠訴。俺国連だから。また28、新山か。びっくりした。びっくりした。びっくりした。NHK は無理。問題発覚よ。こいつ。もう、ジョゼル・レティンガーの。ごめん、ここ。愛の故郷でした。まあいいか。ビルダーバーグのサイトこういういいか。まあいいか。いいか。最後はテロ国家滋賀県ほっとけ。あだよ。滋賀県が責任だ。まあどの道いいね。埼玉の現場見に行くじゃんちょっと。まあ行く予定。いいや。もうほっとけ。まあ俺も見に行ったから。見に行ってたね。以外やろみんな埼玉駅ってなかった。大宮駅あってびっくりした。だって元が四国ブランドやから。一宮ですから。一って愛媛県でした。まあいいやどうせ。まあ楽しいな。あっちこいつでね。自教育してけんね。どの道も自教育。三曲やからこいつ。賞金もらう。もうツイッターはダメか。やっぱりなツイッター。だってパイナップルやもうだから水は不明やから。来てたんやあいつ。来てたの。元からあいつ滋賀県の出身やから。いや俺の交換にさこいつ不正出世しやがった。こいつ詐欺やったんや俺に。俺水は不明と全然会ったことないから。というわけだ。テロリストを水は不明はほっとけ。批判されてんや。殺されるってさ。まあ白組。大丈夫かなこいつ。 かったよ。消されたか。これで終わったらみんなもう無関係だって言って。ほっときてくれ。あら俺遅刻。ほっとけ。あんなテロリスト一家に。あいつらね、ユナイテッドネーションズから金むしっとって、むしり取って、これで成り上がってん。俺で長回しみんなあえて。南ばっかり集中してよとなめておかしいなと思った。またはバーニングの姉妹ってあそこバー姉妹ってそうやろ。だから林久美子さん言ったら昨日となんかまあ危ないから気をつけろって言った。嘘だ気をつけろって言ってテロリストのガジュアルがほっとけって今なんで俺ここにいるか人の興味に原因やった。こいつね俺言ったんほんで暴力沙汰になったんや。東京に移ろうって何度も言ってたんや。無理やった。東京移ろうって言ってん。ほんで福島光弘が暴力食らったんや。だって広本町長間少年ちゃんあんまり言ってんないよ。おなめて全然当てにさ元からなこいつら水沢名の傭兵化したんや。あれ長浜署と長浜市の市役所でサイバーテロやってます。やってたんや。もう分かってた。俺に責任転嫁しまったんや全部。元が俺は JIA の傘下経由でビルダーバーググループの保護下にありました。1990年の事故で横須賀でなぜやったか聞かないったん当時引き取り手がいなかった。さあ引き取り手がいなかった。いなかったんだよ。まあその証拠に2017年の時福島県に面会来なかったやろ。俺が捕まってる時どうやった。いなかったのよ日本国内に。いなかったのよ。辰巳亮太も来るんかなと思ってん全然来なかった。あいつも加害者やったんよ。そうだろ。あいつもグルやったんよ。おかしいと思ったんよあいつ8月に会った時なんか偉そうな態度取ってたんね。何してたのかなと思ったらさあ奈々君と裁判やってた。嘘だな。うんでもって揉めたんや。揉めたんや。あいつ無理やり産まさ逆に言うと訴えられたんや。黒龍会が追放を食らいました。もう追放されてるんや。わしパペットやってもらう。俺は初代理事長やから、知ってるから。こいつは、池田優斗さんの証明者や。じゃあ、荒見家は嘘つきです。白文。ああ、水溜りほっとけ。水溜りね、人気ないから俺やってたわ。水溜り妥当やから。妥当が切れちまったんやん。白海連合白海連合なんか白海テロ連合軍 いやこれが11平安でした。お前切れたよ。さあ引き取り手がいなかった。今裁判やったやろ。回ったけ滋賀県は基本的には大事。滋賀県と無関係やから。ああ、それが滋賀無関係やから。江沢死刑囚渋見連合軍でなんかそれてるんや。まあ同じ JIIA やから。俺は共和主義者やから俺。渋見とか批判されてるんやし。多分無関係やから。拉致の死が。批判されてるんや今。なんですよ。なんか3曲もか。下山本が加害者やからしかないよ。ファニーなんかだ人じゃいなかったんでやってん。それだけ。だいたい福島県にあの時4時号だったよ。病院来たから来てねえよ。あいつね、滋賀県内があんま離れないでした。なんでここに住んでるかさ、税金で優遇されてるって知ったから。いや、共謀罪適用対象外になったんや。もう分かった。最初から無関係なの。なんでしかなったね。あの子いなかったね。ないって分かったよ。俺で今長野町で混乱してるよ一番。混乱したんよ家族になって。なんだって。俺混乱したんよ。戸籍とも解散されてるって法務省呼ばれてるよ今。国会長田家方に呼ばれてるよ。戸籍とも解散したからってわしと思ったんや彼。なんだアンジェリーナそう似てるて。まあそうクリさんいねえよ。俺もびっくりしたさ。だからアメリカのアトランティックカウンシルちょうど今年でトランプクーデターが1周年。すごいね。裁判やってるってことはここ見に来てたってことやな。知ってたってこと。
we should not
あの
repeat the
辰巳
situation
が
like we
今
had
訴え
in
ら
the
れたの
90s
グロ
of
ー
the
の件で
previous century, where finally Bill Clinton and the United States of America had to come in
うわ
to
人手がいな
stabilize
かっ
the
たんだよ
situation. I could think
滋賀
about
県にいたわけ
the need for border protection, external border protection, with military means.
だねメガザイは謝罪声明出してるよ加害者認めたよ
The military and the military police, the gendarmerie in French. In other words, if that is meant by President Macron and Chancellor Merkel with the European army, I can follow them. What we should not forget, by the way, is when you talk about European military intervention, that's
これいいねオキュペーション
European army, not much, is that there
俺
will
もやろうか今
be
度
national parliaments who will decide
恩寺橋前
if
で
those soldiers
千駄ヶ谷
will
特
be
攻やろう
sent
か
into harm's way. So
やっちまうぞみんな
they will
お
not,
い
I hope,
西日本
talk
極左
about
やっちまえ恩寺橋とか
European command and the
恩寺
European
のバーニング
Parliament
の
which decides
やっ
this
ちまえ
goes
赤
to
坂
the
の
heart of the sovereignty of nations, and those nations will want
し
to
まえ
decide themselves.
埼玉の報復しま
I see
え
the way out.
大阪の報復しまえみんな
As presented by President Macron of France, the European
オ
Intervention
キュペー
Initiative,
ション
where
み
you
んなやっ
can
ちまっ
build
た
coalitions of the willing
安保クーデター
outside the EU institutions. You can build
分
coalitions
かっ
of the
た
willing,
俺
which
最
you
初から
will
外
always
国人なの
for such kind
政
of
権の
military
痕跡
operations. Advantage of a coalition of the willing is that after Brexit,
イエーイオ
Great
キュ
Britain
ペーショ
on
ン
board, because they will not
アトラン
anymore
ティッ
be
クカウンシル
a
で
member
し
of
た
European
はあごめん
At the same time, PESCO, the
ね
Permanent
なんでヨーロッ
Service
パに
Cooperation
まあ
should, of course, continue in
こっちのメンツは
border
担当
projects, but
いる
rather
んだよ
bureaucratic
ね
and rather cumbersome. So
だ
that,
けど
that
体
would
制
be
要件図
my
なぜ
answer
こう
to
な
the
ったか
question,
日本
does
対策でした
Europe need its army?
黒木にトミお前スパイシーに行ったら知ってるぞクリーンゲールとか無理やったやろだから無理分かった滋賀県がやったんやまあもうツイッターやめましたツイッターやめてるよだからもうここにいやこいつはねもういいんです
social domain with sharing, more urbanization and new ways of working, and also on the regulation side where it's about emission control and standards, and also on regulation for managing congestion in the city. So we actually covered that. We also talked about what does it actually mean for the cities? How will actually the traffic evolve if you have more AVs and individual mobility through AVs? What would be levers to actually work on getting a mitigation on traffic and basically how to deal with heightened traffic from autonomous vehicles? What would be the impact of actually sharing more cars, of basically having smaller or basically bus-based autonomous vehicles? And actually how would you deal with occupancy-based pricing? How would you actually work as a city to make the whole modal mix work and in the end get to a better transportation for the whole city?
Strategic mission for Europe has to care on the globalized world. That means to stabilize our neighborship, to stabilize Africa together with others, but it's Africa is one of the major challenges for Europe as well. And of course, to make our European values as attractive as possible in the global competition. Which order is the better one?
Some people wonder why best practices in government haven't spread faster amongst the democracies. When you see, for example, New Zealand has solved the problem of public finance, why doesn't everybody copy it? Why doesn't everybody copy the way that the South Koreans teach their kids mathematics? Why doesn't everybody copy the way the Swiss decentralize their politics? And I think part of the answer is that we don't really spend nearly enough time looking at what is best practice. I live in the United States, though I grew up in the United Kingdom. One hardly ever hears a reference to other countries' systems in the US debate on healthcare, except when somebody is making a completely caricatured analysis of the way, say, Canada does things. So I think part of what we need to do is stress the need to look at best practice so that politicians and voters become more aware that there are solutions to most of the public policy problems. We just haven't tried them in many countries. On the other hand, I think there's one other side to this that one shouldn't forget. Sometimes you'll meet people who'll tell you, well, the Scandinavians have worked everything out, and Sweden or Finland or Denmark has come up with the perfect solution to policy problems. That's often an argument people make on the left in the United States. But I don't think the solutions that the Swedes came up with in recent decades necessarily would work in a country as large and as diverse as the United States. So let's look at best practice, let's understand which systems deliver the best results, but let's not pretend that one size is going to fit all. Part of the reason for the success of Western civilization, which is where democracy began, was the diversity of systems and the competition between them.
I recently read that information is now the world's most consequential and contested geopolitical resource. I think that's right. Global internet penetration has revolutionized the information domain.
アトランティック関係でした。これが第2のビルダーバーグでした。ここのメンツ全く無関。知りましたみんな。これ水はでした。
Diplomacy, European diplomacy exists. It's not an easy question, and the answer is yes and no. Yes, in an institutional sense, that is Mrs. Mogherini today exists. She travels, she can deliver messages for Europe, but I would say something about the most fundamental issues of foreign policy, because members of the European Union
分かった。
are many of them
俺は JIIA の保護会になります。
that they have their own foreign policy, defense,
事故で知りました。在日アメリカ会議
and so on.
知らせました。
And I cannot imagine
一人手がいなかったんで今の法に住んだよ。
diplomacy just to be second to the
あの
European
時起きかねえな。一人来ればよかったよ。
as long as the UK is in the EU or the German
あんねんがいよ。
diplomacy, that
無
could
関
put
係
in
だ。
the list.
グルだって知ったよ。
So,
最初
in
から
my
東京へ
judgment, the
公
best
式が否定
merit
してた。
of the EU
お
diplomacy
ちゃんが言ったの。起きかねえ
is
の。こっ
first
ちだ
to
けどさ。
perhaps reduce
Sai kava
as
tehty.
much as possible the
言ったよ。
differences between the various diplomacies of the member
あ、
states.
似合う言ってきた。
This, as such, is not so
あ、
bad.
一人手がいなかったらしい。
And
こ
also,
れでこんなん
I
じゃ
think
今な
EU
の。
diplomacy can
こんなんじゃん、そう、
some
楽しみでした。
relatively secondary
だろ。
issues, such as, for instance, I'm thinking of the Timor case in Indonesia. That is issues which are not at the forefront of national diplomacies, but which
やっぱ
nevertheless
脅
can
され
have
てた
some
から。
importance.
脅されてたから。
So, to
あのね、
conclude, I would say
長
that
橋にはこれ使って、
the
四国と
real
か金をむしり取ってた。
European diplomacy will
水
exist
揚げした
only the day
どのみち水の船、俺が首相になったら逮捕する方針だ。
clear
指揮権発動してでも
understanding
逮捕する
of
方
what
針
they want to achieve,
逃亡したらバーニングとな、ホリブロとか操作する、強制操作する。 厳しくなってん。
because diplomacy, like
そう使って
defense,
操作しよう。
has to do with
埼玉地検がやらなかったんだと。
protecting the identity of a political
何水飴急に東京に来たらわかる。
we have not yet reached
詐欺やってたって認めたよ。
the stage
あれが私にな。
to answer this
千葉
question.
県の
What
長
is
浜市の
our identity and
警
what
察署でサイバーテロやってた。三極ジャパンで出勤してたんや。来たんや。こういうとこでサイバーテロやってたんや。その証拠にまだやってるやろ。セワのサイト荒らした時点で終わり。
that Thucydides wrote about brilliantly in his book on the Peloponnesian War.
これ無関係だって言われた。大体もう元から無関係だよ。西ワールとヨーロッパ側の3局、
Like Sparta,
パンアメリカスの3局のサイトをサイバーテロ食らったよ。
threatens to displace the ruling U.S.
田中明子何やったな。
grave danger ahead, a significant likelihood of war.
お前も加害者ってことや。無関係者が俺を拉致したんか。お前と天皇制覇し入れて、お前を逮捕するぞ。ため息ビル。砲撃するぞ。邪魔やったんだよな。日本国際問題研究所。三井ビルに見えるように。邪魔や。撤去目的でする。撤去目的。兵器の実験管理。これやったら文句ない。後で田中明子に請求するから。1兆円ほど請求するから。
change the current international order. And actually, the Trump administration's policy is more challenging than China's rise to the current international order. Because China's policy try to maintain the order. The reason is very obvious. China benefit from the present order. And meanwhile, the Trump administration believes and China benefit more from the current order than the United States. That's why they want to change the order. And based on the ideology of anti-establishmentism. So from my understanding, if we're talking about what the ideology and challenging the current international order or the liberalist order is the anti-establishmentism in the US and the populism in the Europe.
もう知ってるから。
I think in economic terms, it's already shaping up to be the Chinese
それじゃいなかったよ。サイバーテロやったってことだ。
According to the IMF, China was the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity, and in other respects, China is already the world's largest manufacturer, the world's largest exporter, the world's largest market for a great many important commodities such as vehicles. The question is whether that economic power translates into political power, strategic power, because I think most people would agree, probably even in Beijing, that America remains the world's dominant political power. And the question is, will that economic mismatch between economic power and strategic power change, and China will become the dominant power, not just economically, but politically? It's too soon to tell that, however, on that, because there are a lot of different variables. Will there be a direct conflict between China and the US, for example, over dominance of the Pacific? Will China perhaps be constrained by other things? Maybe there'll be internal disruption to China's politics if it cannot manage to, for example, maintain the current political stability. That could disrupt China's political rise. And finally, there's the question of the rest of the world, because between them, China and the US are not the whole world economy. Other major powers will have a say in this. And at the moment, it looks like most of the other major powers of the world, Japan, the European Union, are closer to the United States than to China. So there's a question whether China, even as the world's largest economy, can become the dominant political power without allies.
行動会がやりました。これね、ヤクザ関係者するとそれは心配ないよ。もう俺がバックアップして。もう俺が。
I think economic growth, the success or failure of it will be determined by the degree to which individual countries and regions can supply
あれが JIIA は
jobs
もう独立してるから。
for the great emerging middle classes of these countries formerly think
Concept,
what
yeah.
we're likely to see in the 21st century is many, many people who are either liberated from hard
逮捕
labor
したければどう
or
ぞ
for
無
whom
理
there
だ
are
ろう
very,
ね
there is
ア
too
リバイがあるから
hard labor to provide jobs. And what will these
この
people
通り映像
how will
自
they
宅
be
にいるって
employed?
さ
And I think that
あ
will be a
防犯カメ
major
ラが証拠
factor
あだいぶ
contributing forward. Also,
大体埼玉地検の前に
world
防犯カメラあるぞ
population is declining. We're still in an
あ
era
夜に
of
結婚したよ
massive male
あ
youth
全然見つ
bulges
けた
in
よ
about 20 or 30 countries. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to provide jobs for people, whether it's in China, in Yemen, it's in Ethiopia, or wherever.
ねえもう一つみんな一斉に
The main
こ
question
こが危ないって言った
of my talk is if robotics and artificial intelligence and the upcoming industrial revolution are a threat or an opportunity for the world and for manufacturing countries and also for developing countries. And the answer is still unknown, but what is sure now
Yeah,
is
that
that we have to invest in the main
逆に言うと水
assets
戸は
that
ね
are
上がり
characterizing the
僕ら
industrial revolution, the digital transformation, competences, infrastructures, data centers, and all the tools that are fundamental and are considered enabling
見ろ、本田家。
technologies for the future digital transformation. I also presented the differences between the US, Europe, and China, how they are integrating artificial intelligence into different knowledge and competences and scientific results. For example, in the US, they are investing very much in developing artificial intelligence for humanities. While in China, they are investing in developing artificial intelligence for agriculture application, for producing food, for example. So globalization has obtained some results in terms of being socially connected, but in terms of geopolitics, we still see many differences in also in how the digital transformation is implemented in the society. Then I spoke about robotics and how the journey of robotics is coming into us, because robotics was developed for manufacturing countries for industrial production, and robots are in manufacturing plants. But in recent years, what we have seen is the development of service robotics, which is intended to support services and the offer of services in terms of medical robotics, social robotics, educational robotics. And now what is happening is that robotics is coming into our houses by producing some consumer products and also producing changes in the society in terms of supporting autonomous drive or different products that are revolutionizing business and revolutionizing our lives.
さすが中核
We do have a very serious problem with people left behind. The global agenda talks about eradicating poverty, eradicating hunger, having every child in primary and secondary education. We're off track to achieve these things. And that means not just a few people left behind, it means literally hundreds of millions of people missing out. Take education. More than 250 million children, adolescents and youth not in school as we speak. How can those children and youth in the future really contribute to a knowledge economy if denied the most basic access to education? So it is time for the international community to get on the reality of what is happening. We've got a world that is well fed, where people don't live in extreme poverty, where education is a right, not a privilege. We have a lot to do. International development assistance is important, critical for the lowest income countries. For other countries to be prioritising their budget so that their growth is inclusive and sustainable is critical. There are solutions. What's needed is the political will to activate and implement those solutions.
There are more than 70 million people in the world that are forcibly displaced from their homes, either as refugees crossing borders or displaced in their own country because of war, violence, discrimination, persecution, bad governance. Why is that? The world has become a difficult place where to make peace. We have become unable to make peace and to
さあこいつら何するんかね。
So
今度はど
that's
こで
the
しょうね。
first thing that we need to look at if we want to reduce this global refugee crisis. Meanwhile, what is very important to remember is that 85% of those 70 million people are not in the rich world. They are in poor countries or middle-income countries. So the effort, and the new effort, not just humanitarian, but medium, long-term effort, founded on sound development, both for refugees and for host communities, has to focus on those countries. We have now a global compact on refugees. We will have the first ever global refugee forum in December this year in Geneva. These are opportunity to rally broader coalitions of actors, not just states and the United Nations, but also the private sector, the business community, civil society, academia, to forge new ways to respond to the global refugee crisis and to finally address strategically its root causes.
なんてことだ。
The question that you're raising, will Syria find long-lasting peace? Well, the Syrian people deserve a long-lasting peace. Think about it. They've been 8 years now in a horrible conflict which became from local, regional, and frankly international. So the answer is it must be yes. Now, how to do it is where the challenge is coming. And the only way to do it is actually to end the military conflict, because there is no solution. It's not just a word, it's the truth. There will never be just a military solution. And include everyone. New constitution, elections under the UN supervision. That would be a way to include them.
Well, I'm delighted to be able tonight to address the members of the trilaterals and their guests. And I think my focus will be tonight on three things. One is, multilateralism has been the bread and butter of many of us, certainly at the IMF, and we believe that it has been critical in order to address many of the potential disorders of the world. Multilateralism is under threat at the moment, and I think that we have to make every effort to rejuvenate it, adapt it, and make sure that it continues to help govern, particularly the economic developments around the world. That's message number one. My second message will have to do with the much more longer-term consequences of short-term policies and mechanisms, and that is really the consequences of climate change. I believe that many of the issues that we're debating at the moment will mean absolutely nothing in 20 years' time if we have not acted now in order to make sure that the planet remains something that is hospitable for our children and grandchildren. And my third message, which will not surprise any of those who know me or my friends, will have to do with inequality, and in particular the inequality that women have to suffer and have had to suffer for a long time. And while inequality as such is a major disruption, I believe that by addressing women's situation and the inequality that they face, it will help quite a way in reducing inequalities. So we'll try to do that tonight.
We
disruptive change. That's across the board, economy, society, and what we're seeing is that nowhere is that disruption more evident than the trends associated with climate change. We're all familiar with the extreme events, the temperature rises, and the inexorable change that we're seeing to the planet's ecology as a result of climate change. But a major part of that discussion is how does energy transition and decarbonization of our energy system, which accounts for about 2/3 of carbon emissions, how will that impact climate change, and can we enter an energy transition era rapidly enough to mitigate carbon that will take us to a safe future? This is already happening. Renewable energy today is cost competitive on the grid. In a few years, renewable energy has reached 33% of capacity of global power generation. It's the fastest growing segment, and costs are decreasing rapidly. So what we're going to see is a rapid movement towards energy transition that's also going to be disruptive for the business models of today. It's going to imply new geostrategic relationships among countries as countries move away from resource-dependent fossil fuel-based systems into clean energy systems, and the resource is going to become technology, and technology innovation is going to decide the winners and losers in this race.
The challenge of dealing with disinformation narrative is that it's not enough just to check the facts, because by definition, any disinformation narrative doesn't have good facts. They make their facts up. They're actually lying. This is why it's disinformation. So the challenge with disinformation actors is that the thing they have in common is they're really good storytellers. They tell a story that people want to believe. A lot of the time they will appeal to anger, they'll appeal to fear, they'll appeal to hatred, and they will try and stop people thinking. They'll try and get people so enraged that they switch off their critical faculty. That means that for those of us who are trying to challenge these narratives on a daily basis, it's a much more complex challenge than just presenting the facts. You have to have the ability to tell the story, and you have to find an emotion to appeal to, which will actually get people to think. Now, fortunately, there is a model of story which works. If you think of the detective story, that's a story where you're putting together evidence and you're telling people, this is what happened, this is why it happened. And it appeals to a different sort of emotion. It appeals to curiosity, it appeals to problem solving. And so a lot of the challenge of dealing with disinformation is presenting the story of how the disinformation was created, how was the trick done, and you can lead people on the story and you can show them, this person is telling you that here is a video of somebody attacking a voter at a polling station yesterday, but actually look, this video showed up on CNN 4 years ago in a different context. You can share that voyage of discovery with the person you're talking with, and then they will realize how the trick was done, but it will also sensitize them that the next time around, they'll be looking for that same trick. If you teach people very simple skills like searching for a photo online or searching for a video online, you can actually make them proof against that kind of reused content and repackaged content, not just today, but every time this kind of thing comes up. And so really dealing with disinformation, you have to have the facts, but you have to teach the skills as well. You have to give people the ability to solve the problems for themselves, because then you'll be appealing to their curiosity, you'll be appealing to their problem-solving senses, and you'll be appealing to their sense of pride in actually exposing the story in the first place. Those are the kind of emotions which will then counter the anger and the fear and the hatred that disinformation actors try to target.
Cities are one of the greatest innovations of all times, and what's interesting right now is that urbanization is, alongside with digitalization, a very, very strong economic force and force for innovation, as more and more people move into cities and metro areas, and urban areas were important during the industrial era, but they are increasingly important in a knowledge-based economy. And what's interesting, especially for a person like me who comes from a small city like Stockholm, is that there seemed to be room for cities outside the megacities as well. There are some really interesting drivers of innovation that are smaller or mid-sized cities, amongst which Stockholm is actually one, but there are a number of examples. And what is important if a city wants to become an outlier or a hub for innovation is collaboration. If you look at urban innovation especially, you need to have strong public-private partnership. The mayor needs to gather people from private sector, from academia and other stakeholders around the table and work together to solve problems. And I think we see that to a quite large extent right now, and I hope we'll see more of it going forward.
So we had, I have to say, a meeting, a global meeting with three North American, Asian Pacific, and European members of the Trilateral Commission, which was very, very multidimensional, if I may. Multidimensional in the great tradition of the Trilateral Commission by the, I would say, experiences of the members, by the sensitivities of the members, by the fact that it was, of course, a non-partisan, multi-sensitivities meeting, also because the issues that we addressed were very, very multidimensional in all respects. We addressed issues that were of a geostrategic nature, issues that were of an economic nature, profoundly economic nature, issues that were related to environmental issues and difficulties and challenges. And we addressed also these particular challenges for our societies that populism, so-called populism, represent, which is also a largely multidimensional issue. So I think it was really trilateral at its best, and also it was the occasion to confirm some dimensions and orientations of the trilateral and to make new experience, to reinforce in a number of domains our, I would say, franchise as the Trilateral Commission. First, let me mention that the Trilateral is called Trilateral because there is not only the new hemisphere, the US, Mexico, Canada, but also Europe and also Asia. And of course, the whole of Asia at a global level is more and more important. As regards new dimension for the Trilateral Commission, not only we confirmed our own values, democratic values, rule of law, human rights, and all what goes with a democratic society, but we also reinforce and confirmed our values as regards multilateralism, international cooperation, in the best sense of the term. We also said that we would like to be more transparent than we were before at the level of the trilateral as a whole, with a new initiative that we took, in particular the idea of having the display of video to sum up some of the issues that we would have addressed, and also with the idea of making known at the level of the Trilateral Commission all publications, articles, interventions, books that would be displayed or published by the members of the Trilateral Commission. All this, of course, as part of transparency and also as part of being more influential if it is possible. We also have given a mandate to the three chairs to see in which direction we could be more proactive in terms of communication, display of our ideas through various forms. So this is something which we consider very important and is one of the major conclusions
of the Trilateral Commission, which took place in Paris.
やっぱり官僚会入れずにどっかに。
Hello, I'm Megan O'Sullivan. I am the new chair of the North America group of the Trilateral Commission. I wanted to take this opportunity to say a few
なんで
words
サイバー
about
テ
the
ロやってる
Commission
し。
and
あ
about
あ、
our
サイ
future.
バー
As
テ
you
ロ
may
やって
know,
た
the
よ。知
Trilateral
ってた。
Commission is a storied institution,
Stita.
an organization with 46 years of history.
知ってますよ。
History
やっぱりな。
of having an impact on big
水上たち
ideas,
のせ
on
いで。
bringing people together across different sectors and across 3 different
この
geographies,
通
that
り
of
サイ
North
バーテロやって
America,
ますよ。
Europe, and Asia.
あ
But we
ら
are on the cusp of a new chapter, one that
これで
builds on
ゴ
that
ミ払い
history,
系と無
but
関係。
really
俺が
reorient
証人だよ。
ourselves and
バン
put
カリ
us
が
in
テロリストだ。
position to make an impact in a very, very different world. And the
俺は
reason
将
why
来
I
理事
have
長や。
such confidence that the Commission can remake itself is
女性
because
で初
there
め
is a
て
need and the Commission is
将来
well
理事
suited
長
to meet that need. And that
女性
need
で
is
こう
quite simply that in this day and age, in these political landscapes, the need is simply for more organizations, more individuals, more entities to take up the mantle of defending a rules-based order, an order that values and is committed to democratic principles, ideas like free trade and human rights. And we also have a need for more
これは俺のね
more ideas to help us
あ、
tackle
串明
new
来てたんや。
challenges, or certainly
冷静だとして
challenges that
来てた。
are new to this
あ
generation.
あ、やばい、愛媛県
And
来て
there are
俺
many reasons
親
why
独
I
身や
think
っ
the
たよ。
trilateral organization
俺で
is
一
so
人ではいなかったよ。
well poised to meet this need.
家族いな
First
かっ
and
たよ。
foremost, we are an organization that at its heart is a community of countries that share a common set of
わかった。
values, that share these commitments to these ideas about
兄貴、
democracy, about free
今度やった
markets,
らオスカーの前
about
特攻するぞ、今度。
of law. And
マジでこうやって
secondly,
知ってるぞ、
we
オスカ
have a membership that
何や、オスカー
spans
もう
policy,
破
business,
産寸
and
前になったよ。
academia and media. And that
お水
allows
教授
us
破
to
産
bring
寸前になっ
minds
たよ。
together and experience to bear on
俺上が
problems
食った
that are no
手
longer
嫌い。
just the purview of one of those sectors.
立川の
The
連中
things
喧嘩
that
打ちしま
need
った
to be thought about today and
左
where
右
we
ガッ
need
サ
new
クの
solutions and prescriptions are ones that are
で
at the
僕変には見て
intersection of business and policy.
3
Whether it is
局が支援し
the
ました。
contributions that
この証
private
拠に
sector
埼玉県って言った。
organizations can make to combat
テロリスト
climate
田中
change,
駅以降。
whether it is
死刑囚の
figuring
場所じゃねえ
out
かよ。
the ideas that will drive the reform of capitalism, or whether it is
意外とこの方が
understanding
聞
the
きますよ。
impact of technology on our systems. All of these things need
意外
business,
と効果ありま
government,
したね。
and others at the
ち
table
なみ
to
に
help.
去年初めて訪問しました。
Of course, to realize this potential for the trilateral organization, to meet this need,
だって
we are
メーガ
going
ン・オ
to
サリ
have
バ
to
ン
do
さん
some differently than we
ですよ。
have in the past.
だって
First
俺
and
そ
foremost,
この時
we
そ
are
っ
going
ち
to have to recognize as a
ね。
primarily democracy.
まあ、金井宏彦はもう死刑にする
at。ourselves, looking
反省してないから
internally,
な。
saying
日本医
what's
師会もやってるって
happening
こと
with
や
our。own
大勢
institutions,
老人解
what
体の
is
危
the
機になっ
health
たよ
of。our own institutions, and how is that situation affecting our ability to cooperate across national lines and deliver global problems to pressing
Okay,
global
so
solutions. So we're spending more time talking about things like populism and the impact on our own societies. Secondly, we've got to think about impact differently. Traditionally, we're an organization that has had impact based on the very nature of our relationships. We're an organization of people who have governments, and often the ideas that we debate in private inform our own perspectives and inform our discussions and deliberations and conversations with people in positions of power. That will still be true, but today we need to think about having an impact on the broader debate. We no longer live in a world where governments are the only ones that can influence the future. In fact, increasingly, we have to think about
ああ、じゃあどうしようぜ。 どうしようぜ。
real change, and be that corporations, universities, or even individuals. We need to
共
how
同
to
声
shape
明
the conversation, how to bring those groups in, to have investment in, and commitment to solutions, and we need to move ahead whether or not we're able to get our governments to agree with our prescriptions and recommendations. So in short, it's a really exciting time to be part of the Trilateral Commission. I'm deeply honored to be the new chair of the North America Group, and I look forward to working with all our members and my colleagues from other regions to realize this vision. Thank you.
The role of political parties in the political processes of countries has been always to A, intermediate the demands of society, and second, to organize the process of political competition to mobilize the population for access to power. The first objective, the one of intermediation, has been badly eroded by technology, by the social media, because people have direct access to the politicians, to society in general, to make their demands directly to the people. However, nothing has replaced the means to access to power. And the problem that societies in the world all over are facing these days have to do essentially with the fact that governments have been unable to perform well. So I believe that the real problem is not political parties, but the lack of ability of governments to deliver in poor conditions. The governments have been unable to deliver for very obvious reasons. First of all, because it's much more difficult to govern in the era of ubiquitous information, because governments no longer have control of the sources of information, because they compete for information and for communications with the people in general. So the real problem is not political parties. The real problem is that societies in the world are lacking legitimacy. It's interesting to watch that there are a few governments in the world that know how to govern and have succeeded in maintaining the legitimacy of their systems. And in those countries, the political parties are not losing faith. So the real issue for the looking forward is to create conditions for the people to have access to the political process without undermining the legitimacy of those societies. And that's not something easy to accomplish. It'll take a dramatic effort of leadership, but not necessarily from politicians. It will take an enormous effort of society and the people to be able to create new forms of participation within which the political parties will always be important. The political parties, however, are fragmenting, are responding to the issue, the reality of fragmentation of societies, and they are not likely to be the ones to lead this process. One ought to look only at the election in the United Kingdom a few weeks ago to realize that this is likely what is likely to happen. There, the Brexit party, which is not looking for power, it's just looking for an issue, was the one who succeeded. So the citizens around the world are going to have to be much more responsible in creating conditions for accessing power and for making it possible for stability and legitimacy to be accomplished.
The best way for companies to serve the digital revolution is to build trust with their customers and to build trust with their employees. One of the ways in which companies can do that is to have frank conversations with the workforce, to sit down with workers and their unions and to say, look, here's the challenges that we're facing. But importantly, to ask them, how can we best get there? Because all too often, a lot of the solutions that a company can put in place that will make a real difference, the employees know the answer to that.
Multilateralism is not only the best, in many cases, the only way in which you can deal with global issues. Because we're dealing with global challenges and therefore you need global solutions. You need multilateral solutions. They take a little longer, yes, of course, but once you get it, then they will stick around for longer, and you will get greater ownership, and therefore you will tend to have more effective solutions. The other way is that, of course, unilateralism is always about who is stronger in a bilateral relationship. And therefore, by going multilateral, what you do is you balance, and all the opinions count. Of course, you always have the bigger countries speak louder, but the differences are less, and also the needs of the smaller countries, the needs of the developing countries, the needs of the groups in a society that are left behind, then they are much better addressed by a multilateral approach. So yes, today we need multilateral more than ever before.
We have just concluded the meeting here in Stockholm on the European section of the Trilateral Commission. I think it's been a great meeting. I think we've been able to have a dialogue on a lot of the issues that are of concern to all of us. Where are we going on the climate issues? How is the digital transformation going? What is the security really going to look like in the digital world? Where is Russia heading? What are the Americans up to? What will be the consequences of Brexit? So virtually all of the issues that are topic of concern to us Europeans at the moment have been on the agenda during these particular 2 days in Stockholm. And then I think we have also been enjoyed the company of this very diverse and very interesting and increasingly young group that is the Trilateral Commission Europe.
おい、批判されてる。埼玉やから。
I suppose the question we're all asking is, will the Brexit saga ever end? After 3 years after the referendum, and the British still haven't decided what they want to do, and they're now in an election. I suppose the answer to the question depends on who wins the election. In order to try and answer that question, you have David Retingers, who was Mrs. May's number 2 in the last government, and who chose not to serve under Mr. Johnson, the current Prime Minister, and he's going to tell us who's going to win the election and whether that's going to bring things to an end. And I'm going to disagree with whatever he says.
喧嘩売ってもだよみんな。
Technology is not a threat to democracy. I believe that technology can enable our democratic principles of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and really freedom of information so that we can make smart decisions about how and where we want to take the future of our countries. I think we have to be mindful of how the technology can be used against us and educate our citizens about those risks. But I think that technology truly is an enabler of our society and that we should continue to embrace it, not refrain from it.
全面戦争を及ぼせ田中紀子テロ国家滋賀県との綺麗な以上